I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth, and them which dwell therein, to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Revelation 13, 11 through 17.
Some may be unaware of the significant fulfillment of Bible prophecy that took place from October 31st, 2016 to October 31st, 2017 that resulted in the death of Protestantism. And this year, 2018, the same prophecy will reach another important fulfillment, letting us know that the end of all things is at hand. The mark of the beast is soon to be enforced, and your liberties are soon to be restricted.
Hey, Pastor. How's it going?
All is well. All is well.
Good.
All is well.
You know, it's amazing how time flies because approximately 2 years ago, we were standing right here filming the countdown to the death of Protestantism.
That's true.
But it seems like something's on your mind.
Yes. I have been rereading the book Great Controversy, specifically the chapters addressing the Protestant Reformation, the ministry of Martin Luther, and others.
Right.
And we know that Reformation Day is coming, October 31st. And I've been thinking about what happened last year around this time, when Pope Francis and the apostate Protestants, the evangelicals, they publicly announced that Protestantism is dead. And that led me to restudy Revelation 13 and verse number 11, that speaks about America in Bible prophecy. And it brings out 2 horns, which typify Protestantism and Republicanism.
Right.
And we know they both stand together or fall. And since apostate Protestants and Pope Francis have declared last year that one of those horns has now been broken, Protestantism is dead, the Protestant Reformation is over, I'm thinking about what's going to happen this year regarding Republicanism.
Wow.
And for these things, I'm in deep thought, Jared. Deep thought, deep thought.
You know, what you just shared is solemn. And I believe that we need to talk about it, pray about it, and study it some more. Because as I've been looking at current events myself, I've been seeing how God's commandment-keeping people are about to be persecuted, and the second coming of Jesus Christ is near.
Another burden of mine is the fact that we have to warn the churches and the world.
Yeah.
Because there is a crisis coming. And Ezekiel chapter 33, Christ says, if we see the danger coming and we don't warn the world, and they die in their sins, their blood, God is going to require at our hands. But if we warn them and they're saved, praise God. But if they reject the warning, then their blood, God will require at their hands, on their head. So as I'm looking back at the book Great Controversy and the Bible, Martin Luther, Protestant Reformation, and also William Miller, the Advent preacher leading up to 1844, I see in these men the work that we need to be doing. So I went back, Jared, and looked at the biography of William Miller. What gave him such conviction, such power, such staying power, consistency? And these were the words I read in his biography. Go, tell it to the world. And that is the work God has given to us. So, as God used William Miller, he also used Martin Luther.
As Pastor and I were at the Luther Monument, my mind went back to Matthew 24, how the Jews were exalting the temple. But Jesus said, because of your sins, both you and the temple will be destroyed. Likewise, we have seen since October of 2016, all the way to the present, the evangelicals have been exalting Martin Luther, while at the same time destroying the Protestant Reformation, which he rekindled.
In addition to Matthew 24, in the previous chapter of Matthew 23, Jesus said to the Jews of his day that they built the tombs of the prophets and said if they had lived in the days of the ancient prophets, that they would have obeyed the prophets and honored their movements. But Jesus said that they were guilty of killing the ancient prophets. Similarly, Papists, Pope Francis, and apostate Protestants, yes, the evangelicals, publicly they speak highly of Martin Luther. But what would Christ say to them today? They are guilty of destroying the very movement that Martin Luther rekindled, which was the Protestant Reformation. And the great question is, what will they do to those who continue the Protestant Reformation in these last days?
The wide diversity of belief in the Protestant churches is regarded by many as decisive proof that no effort to secure a forced uniformity can ever be made. But there has been for years in churches of the Protestant faith a strong and growing sentiment in favor of a union based upon common points of doctrine. To secure such a union, the discussion of subjects upon which all were not agreed, however important they might be from a Bible standpoint, must necessarily be waived. The Great Controversy, page 444.
You know, Pastor, it's interesting because since October of last year, the evangelicals were commemorating the 500th year anniversary of the day Martin Luther nailed those 95 theses to the church door at Wittenberg. And also on that day, they were saying that the Protestant Reformation has now come to an end. But I've been thinking, you know, since that time, I have not heard anything about it.
And Jared, that's why I believe the Lord needs us to continue the protest, to continue the Protestant Reformation. Now, leading up to October 31st, 2017, we recorded the video entitled Countdown to the Death of Protestantism, to awaken the world to what was coming. One of those two horns would be broken. We are here now. So what do we need, Jared? A second video to enlighten the world, to make them aware that the second horn is about to be broken.
I agree. Well, we better get going.
Because in these last days, we cannot be found sleeping. What movements shall be rapid ones?
Final movements.
Let's go, brother.
And he had two horns like a lamb. The lamb-like horns indicate youth, innocence, and gentleness, fitly representing the character of the United States when presented to the prophet as coming up in 1798. Among the Christian exiles who first fled to America and sought an asylum from royal oppression and priestly intolerance were many who determined to establish a government upon the broad foundation of civil and religious liberty. Republicanism and Protestantism became the fundamental principles of the nation. These principles are the secret of its power and prosperity.
Prophecy being fulfilled even in these upcoming midterms that are happening right now.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey!
Hey, how's it going?
How are you guys?
Jared, good to see you.
Hey!
Jared, Jeffrey, how you doing? Good to see you.
Love you.
Pastor?
Please join us.
How's everything? What's going on?
Well, Pastor, I couldn't resist telling everyone what you told me about the upcoming midterm election.
That's right.
And also the relevance of Revelation chapter 13.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's really eye-opening. It's astonishing how many articles I found while I was doing my research as it relates to what is at stake for these upcoming midterm elections from the perspective of not only Republicans, but also conservative evangelicals, as well as the prophetic implications to them. So let's consider some of these headlines here that I found. Listen to this. This is from USA Today. It says, Mike Pence warns Christian conservatives against complacency in the midterm elections. Here's another one from One News Now. It says, Mike Pence urges evangelicals to match the motivated left. Another one from NPR. It says, faith groups get out to vote for the midterm elections. What is this pointing to? Another one from Vanity Fair. Trump has kept his end of the bargain. Can evangelicals dance with the devil and not get burned? Another one from CNN. It says Trump warns evangelicals of violence if the GOP or the Republicans lose in the midterm elections. Another one here from Christian Post. Evangelical groups are spending millions to drive social conservative turnout for the 2018 midterms. And another one here. Again, there's so many. From PBS News. The Quiet Evangelical Campaign to help Republicans hold onto the House and the Senate.
You know, Richard, when you're showing us these headlines, I mean, it's showing me that it's so evident that the union of church and state is becoming so rapidly. I mean, when you think about it, the evangelicals are pushing, and this shows that we're also getting closer to the National Sunday Law. But one thing that I'm excited for is that it's leading us to one step closer to Jesus' second coming. I'm so looking forward to that.
You know, Jeremy, I agree with you. It is a very exciting time to be living in. But at the same time, I always have to ask myself these questions. Am I prepared for what is about to take place on the earth? And also, do I have the faith to remain faithful to God no matter what?
Great controversy, page 621. The season of distress and anguish before us will require a faith that can endure weariness, delay, hunger, a faith that will not faint though severely tried. This period of probation has been granted to all to prepare for that time. We're in some serious times.
We really are.
Hey guys, this is a very serious and deep conversation, but Dwayne's on the line. He's outside waiting. We have to go.
We have to continue this conversation.
We do.
We do.
So deep.
We gotta go.
Let's go, guys.
All right. Very
I mean,
important.
because when you think about it,
I mean, I got so many more
it's the
articles.
only country that's kept all
That's
the
right.
evangelical.
Now that we have your attention, let us define the terms Protestantism and Republicanism in the context of the founding of America. The Bible was held by the Pilgrim settlers as the foundation of faith, the source of wisdom, and the charter of liberty. It was demonstrated that the principles of the Bible are the surest safeguards of national greatness. The feeble and isolated colonies grew into a confederation of powerful states, and the world marked with wonder the peace and prosperity of a church without a pope and a state without a king.
Pastor, this is one of the sites that held a service in 2017 stating that the Protestant Reformation had come to an end.
And what people need to understand, Jared, is that the confederacy between Roman Catholics and evangelicals became prominent and gained momentum by the speech made by the late Tony Palmer.
Right.
When he made that speech at Kenneth Copeland's church in front of prominent evangelicals and even Pope Francis himself, stating the protest is over.
Brothers and sisters, Luther's protest is over. Is yours. If there is no more protest, how can there be a Protestant church?
And based on that premise, that the Roman Catholics have now accepted the doctrine of biblical justification by faith, based on that, they signed a joint declaration stating the protest is over.
Right.
And a few weeks afterward, Pope Francis stood up and publicly announced that he was now offering the Roman Catholic traditional indulgences. So it shows the papacy hasn't changed, and the evangelicals have been deceived. Or may I say, they accepted willingly the deception. And why is that so significant? Secondly, why did Martin Luther nail his 95 Theses on that church door of Wittenberg?
The sale of indulgences.
And now the papacy is still peddling indulgences. She hasn't changed.
Hasn't changed. And you know, this all fits into Bible prophecy, because in Revelation 17, verses 1 through 5, we see that the papacy is called the mother of harlots. She has daughters, and these daughters are the Protestant churches, because since that joint declaration in 2017 between Catholics and evangelicals, they have now united, and they have a pope, the Protestants do. But watch this, she has regained her daughters, and now she's going to get her husbands, the civil leaders.
Dwayne. Yes, hello?
Preacher, meet me at the airport in 30 minutes. Yeah, we're in Terminal 8. All right?
All right, on our way. There's so much more to cover. Let's go. Let's go. So as we were in Washington, D.C. And discussing ecumenism, and also the death of Protestantism and Republicanism, and how these midterm elections are going to be a public showing that not only Protestantism is dead, but Republicanism, that horn, is about to be broken. So here we are in Florida at Paula White's church. And what people need to understand is who Paula White is, her position, and how much influence she has. Who is Paula White? Paula White is a senior pastor of New Destiny Church in Central Florida. She's also one of the leading spiritual advisors to President Donald Trump. Paula White is also one of the leading voices among evangelical leaders. By the way, President Trump also has a Roman Catholic advisory board. Think about that. Back to Paula White. She belongs to a group of evangelicals that call themselves POTUS Shield and also Dominionists. What do they believe? What are their aims? Their objective is to establish a theocracy in the United States of America, which is influencing state leaders to enforce biblical laws according to them, and force the masses to accept these biblical laws to combat America's moral problems and social issues, which really is church dictating and controlling civil leaders, which will bring about the enforcing of the mark of the beast. It's time to get ready.
Now, you've talked to us about this president, and we're very encouraged about him and seeing the things that he's doing and has done. But his election is 2 years away. What's at stake in this election that's not even 2 months away?
I'm not the type of person that goes, please go out. But I never thought this would be coming out of my mouth. I'm like, I'll never do politics. I'm feeling, please, I'm pleading with you.
I can say to you, vote red. I can say that to you without any fear that the IRS is going to take away your right to donate to this church and deduct it from your taxes.
Amen.
And without you being audited because of it.
This is one of the reasons why former President John F. Kennedy stated the following words.
I believe in an America where the separation of church and state is absolute, where no Catholic prelate would tell the president, should he be Catholic, how to act, and no Protestant minister would tell his parishioners for whom to vote, where no church or church school is granted any public funds or political preference, and where no man is denied public office merely because his religion differs from the president who might appoint him or the people who might elect him. I believe in an America that is officially neither Catholic, Protestant, nor Jewish, where no public official either requests or accepts instructions on public policy from the Pope, the National Council of Churches, or any other ecclesiastical source, where no religious body seeks to impose its will, directly or indirectly, upon the general populace or the public acts of its officials, and where religious liberty is so indivisible that an act against one church is treated as an act against all.
And that was not true in presidents past. Even though we had influence in some areas, in some ways. But if the Lord were to say something to me in the other presidents, that what little I've had to do with them, I don't know. I don't know whether I could have ever gotten anybody to listen to me or not. But I am totally convinced that if the Lord were to say something to me, if the Lord were to say something to David, or if the Lord were to say something to Bishop that the president needs to hear, I have no doubt that we could do it and do it quickly.
Yes, sir.
And have audience to say, thus saith the Lord, and he wouldn't just turn it over to an aide or something and just write it off. He would listen, and it would mean something to him.
Now, as Pastor and I were talking at Paula White's church, my mind went back to a series of conversations we had while back in Washington, D.C. And we went to Washington, D.C., the capital or the heart of the nation. And just as the Bible says, keep thy heart with all diligence, for out of it are the issues of life. Proverbs 4, verse 23. And from Washington, D.C., issues will be brought to prominence that will lead to life or death.
You know, as we're here and I have the White House in the foreground there, my mind goes back to Revelation chapter 13 and verse 11, where it's brought to view the lamb-like beast. And John the Revelator tells us, and I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, having 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And we know that beast represents America, those 2 horns representing Protestantism and Republicanism. And we know Republicanism is essentially a state without a king, which is obviously the opposite of a nation with a king. And we have to look at Republicanism now through the lens, even the historical context of papal reign in that old world.
Right, because Republicanism was born in protest to papal control of monarchs in Europe. And many of those monarchs were staunch Roman Catholics.
Jeff, that is so true. Because I do remember, I mean, back in history, we did find that the kings and the queens, they were actually dictated to by the papacy. And if they did not listen to what they had to say, if they didn't follow their dictates, guess what? They'll be dethroned or they would even be excommunicated. Wow. You know, just to make this point a little more firm, I do remember reading in Great Controversy that there was this king. He was a German emperor. His name was Henry. And he wanted to go make peace with, I think it was Pope Gregory. And Pope Gregory VII, and he wanted to go and make peace with him. So it's midwinter, freezing cold, snowing. So he finally makes it to the Pope's castle, right? And then once he gets there, the Pope separates him from the people that he came with, and he had to sit out in the cold, no shoes and barely clothed.
Wow.
So we can see how the papacy actually has this power and was actually doing it to the kings of back then.
And that fact is very similar to here in America, because if civil leaders do not yield to the dictates of the evangelicals, then they are in danger of losing their votes and ultimately losing their office.
Wow, another example is this. King Ferdinand II and Queen Isabella were staunch Roman Catholics who used their throne to give power to the church. They were also responsible for initiating the Spanish Inquisition, where many of God's commandment-keeping people were persecuted, some even killed, because they did not yield to Catholic doctrine.
Jeff, not only Ferdinand II and Queen Isabella, but you have to remember Mary I of England and of Ireland, most commonly known as Bloody Mary, because she was controlled by the papacy as well, and she also persecuted God's commandment-keeping people.
So let's make sure everyone comprehends what's happening here. So in the old world, so we had the kings and the queens reigning in these nations. But these kings and queens, they received their policies and they were dictated to by the Pope and his emissaries. And all the examples you have just brought forward to confirm that fact, they were already given to us in the Bible. In chapter 17 of the Revelation and verse number 18, it speaks about the papacy, her aims, her work, that she would reign in the nations through emperors, through kings and queens, through even presidents, prime ministers. Verse 18 says, and the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Chapter 17. And the woman is the papacy, the Roman Catholic Church. So basically what we're seeing here is, just as the Bible says, history will be repeated. So look how God providentially set up this very location. At the very front, we have a monument of Queen Isabella I, which was also connected to the Spanish Inquisition. The Inquisition had also a certain group of men called Jesuits to murder, maim, and kill God's commandment-keeping people. That's the old world. If you look behind this monument, what do we see on the far left? The New World. South America.
Wow.
And to the right of the monument, we see North America. And Revelation 13, verse 1 through verse 10, shows us the old world. And verse 11 through verse 18 brings us to the new world. Wow. Providence.
So, Pastor, let me see. Are you saying that the Congress, the president, and just all of the government of America, they'll be dictated to by the evangelicals and even the Catholics?
I'm simply repeating, Jeremy, what the Bible has prophesied.
Wow. Well, you know, Congress is not too far from here, right? It's just up the road.
That
so
is
let's
true.
go.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Thousands of people walk past this site, admire it, and even take pictures of it. And yet, how many can make sense of its significance and discern that what took place in the old world has been adopted by the new world, and soon the tyranny that existed in the former will come to these United States.
Hey, glad y'all made it.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, give me a minute.
All right. So now we come to the New World, which we know to be the United States of America. And America was established as a nation against popery and against papal-controlled monarchies. And of course, we know that it has three branches of government: the executive branch, the legislative branch, and as you can see here, the judicial branch. But all three branches of government today, as in the old world, are being controlled and dictated to by apostate Protestants. And these Protestants now are in league with the papacy.
So that's true. So if the evangelicals are the ones that are influencing and are pretty much dictating to the three branches of government, as you stated, then that means that same branch, that the evangelicals are being indirectly influenced by the papacy. I mean, it's so clear that the evangelicals are contending for the power. Don't you see they're trying to get themselves in and to control the civil powers?
You know what? That's right, because they're using their votes. Evangelicals are using their votes to control legislators by saying that they will not vote for them unless those legislators yield to their demands. No one can deny that when church leaders dictate to civil leaders, that is a gross repudiation of republicanism.
Not just evangelicals, but we can't forget about Pope Francis, who was invited by statesmen now to come to a joint session of Congress back in 2015 to teach not only the common good, but other Roman Catholic social teachings.
That's so true, because allowing the Pope to walk on American soil, that would have never happened in 1776. No. Let alone allowing him to speak to a joint session of Congress. Something has changed, or someone has changed. Wonder who it is, and it's Protestant Americans.
Mr. Speaker, the Pope of the Holy See.
You know, as we're here at Capitol Hill, Congress behind us there, you know, my mind goes back to 2016 during Donald Trump's campaign election. And in that campaign election, he promised to not only appoint Supreme Court justices that share the same values and interests, but he also promised to close the gap between church and state by repealing the Johnson Amendment. And we know those campaign promises, they paid off because it won him that election.
And notice, Trump elected what? 2 Supreme Court justices who are conservative, Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, in the middle of his term.
He did do that. And going back to what you said about the Johnson Amendment, that is a tax provision, a tax code, which prohibits 501c3 organizations from endorsing or opposing a political candidate. And why is this significant? Because the Trump administration, they have said they are not going to enforce it under their administration. And so this is cementing the union between church and state, because church leaders can now dictate to the civil leaders.
I will get rid of and totally destroy the Johnson Amendment and allow our representatives of faith to speak freely and without fear of retribution. I will do that, remember.
And our president began to ensure that the pulpits of America would be free as well, to start the process to roll back the Johnson Amendment, because free speech shouldn't stop at the doors of our churches, synagogues, and places of worship.
Of voters that really helped to push Donald Trump to the White House, evangelicals.
Donald Trump won white evangelicals by a record 81%.
Donald Trump can credit his victory as president of the United States in part by their overwhelming turnout.
Well, we're doing very well with the evangelicals, and if they vote, we're going to win the election.
Do you think he's a Christian?
I don't know. I don't want to speak to that. I can't speak to that.
I grew up my Bible.
You exalt this man to the highest office in this way. Father, we pray for wisdom that you would be glorified.
I pray, Father, that Donald Trump will become so empowered with the Holy Ghost, he'll be praying in the Holy Ghost.
I think it's for power. I think it's for control. Evangelicalism will go to bed with anything that will echo that same philosophy.
We who are evangelical Christians are going to have a true friend in the White House. God bless Donald Trump.
I think evangelicals have found their dream president.
God miraculously intervened, and he didn't do it for Donald Trump. He did it for our nation.
No one, in terms of personal ethics, in modern American politics has so clearly and publicly violated the tradition of evangelical religion than Donald Trump.
When the leading churches of the United States, uniting upon such points of doctrine as are held by them in common, shall influence the state to enforce their decrees and to sustain their institutions, then Protestant America will have formed an image to the Roman hierarchy, and the infliction of civil penalties upon dissenters will inevitably result. The Great Controversy, page 445.
A recent article by CNN states why we need blue laws. So it's clear what men of the world really want. Not to mention the Sunday shopping bans in various countries in Europe being pushed by the Catholic Church and trade unions. We know that in 1888, the Catholic Church, trade unions, and evangelicals pushed for a Sunday law. What did not come to pass in 1888 is about to take place.
Based upon what you have seen, as we have traveled to the three prominent sites in D.C., namely the White House, the Supreme Court, and Congress, which are the three branches of government, it is evident that the church and the state are uniting to enforce the national Sunday law, which will bring persecution for God's people. And we know that it is the church leaders who will influence the state. And this is why we highlighted Paula White, because she is one of Trump's closest spiritual advisors.
It's time to fast, pray, and strategize how to reach this world before it is too late. It's time to get back to the church to put some plan in place. But before we do that, since we're here at Paula White's church, let's get some footage.
All right.
And then we go back to base.
Sounds good.
Let's go. As we can see that Reformation Day is a few days away, October 31st. And we also see that the midterm elections of 2018 is just a few days away, November 6th. It's time for us now to warn the churches and the world to what's coming. And we know what it is, the death of Protestantism and Republicanism. And the words that come to my mind are the words that Mordecai said to Esther. In such a crisis, who knows if you have come to the kingdom at such a time as this? A great burden is upon my heart to reach the world before it's too late. What about you? And before I go any further, I want to read you a very profound statement from Testimonies Volume 9 and page number 19. In a special sense, Seventh-day Adventists have been set in the world as watchmen and light bearers. To them has been entrusted the last warning for a perishing world. On them is shining wonderful light from the Word of God. they have been given a work of the most solemn import, the proclamation of the first, second, and third angels' messages. There's no other work of so great importance. They are to allow nothing to absorb their attention. Nothing.
Guys, you know, there's another quotation that I've been contemplating on, and I want to share with you. It's from volume 9 as well, page 20, paragraph 1. And it says, "Are we to wait until the fulfillment of the prophecies of the end before we say anything concerning them? Of what value will our words be then? Shall we wait until God's judgments fall upon the transgressor before we tell him how to avoid them? Where is our faith in the word of God? We must see things foretold must we see things foretold come to pass before we will believe what he has said?" Guys, it's time to warn the world. The hour is late. We have to get the gospel out.
We do.
And that's the burden we need right now, Jared. That's the burden. And I believe the unction of God's Spirit is in this room right now to awaken the churches and the world before it is too late.
Amen to that. You know, I have an idea. I think what we should do is go and share some literature. You know, in the Great Controversy and the National Sunday Law, it shares a lot of information about everything that is actually taking place.
Right.
So
Exactly.
we should make gift bags so it can look appealing, of course, and then go share them with people so that they can really accept the message, because we really have to help God save some souls.
You know, I like that idea. And also on top of that, we can make a documentary, a video about these things that are transpiring, the death of Protestantism and Republicanism, and put it in the same literature, and share also the video that we did 2 years ago, Countdown to the Death of Protestantism.
Yeah, that's a
Light
good
bulb
idea.
went in my head right now. We could even do also a week of emphasis and live stream it from October 31st leading up to the midterm.
Perfect.
That way people know the times we're living in and what they must do also to get ready. I mean, there it is.
And not only warning them of what is coming, but also the work of preparation.
That's true, yeah.
And we know we cannot do it in our own strength. It's not by our might, nor by our power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord.
Amen. Amen.
So where do we start? With prayer. Let's all pray. Father in heaven,